All right, so let's try this first lesson. So for the sophomore lesson for today, we're looking at the Grahl, right? And the one that we're looking at for today is the Anthony R. Grahl. All right. So, as always, like my primary focus is, trying to have you guys do this independently. And usually it's a situation where we go through and you're labeling all the little parts of speech and stuff like that. Unfortunately, it's not a situation where you can sit together and get that done. So, and I feel like that's a lot of the appeal of that particular lesson. But I do want to kind of go through and, like I usually do, give the verbs for the sentence. Now, keep in mind that the verbs, again, are pretty much how readers read. Like, we look at the subjects and the predicates, and the verb is the thing that indicates the predicate. You don't have to worry about the predicate part of that if you don't have it down. But again, looking at the verbs. So, if you look at the first sentence, it says, in the United States, with its considerable resources, there are, right? So are would be the first verb in the sentence. So let's take a look at that and highlight that. And, we'll make that, we'll do that like that. So if are is the first verb in the sentence. So again, when are is by itself, it's a situation where it's indicating that, the rest of this is pretty much like giving some sort of understanding about what comes before. And we'll get to that later. Let's keep reading. So 36 million adults who can't read. So again, we're going to highlight can't read. And hopefully you guys can see this. My tech at home is not the greatest tech in the world. Okay, so who can't read, right? So can't read is the next verb in the in the sentence. And again, can't read is an action verb, right? So that you know that there's something that's being done. Then it says better than the average third grader. And so that would be the end of the first sentence. Let's put some sort of indicator there. So let's make that a couple of slash marks. All right. So now we know that's the end of the first sentence, right? Second sentence. Those with low literacy skills are far more likely to live. That whole thing right there is the verb phrase. So we're going to underline that, bold that, and highlight that. Okay. So are far more likely to live. And again, at this point, this is an action verb. And again, it's talking about the living conditions of a certain situation. So are far more likely to live in poverty with, so looking at the living situations of people. So those are far more likely to live. And how are they going to live? In poverty. Okay. So then the next situation is face health problems. So face here is a verb phrase as well. So we're going to highlight that. and put that in yellow. Okay, so when you're facing something, like you're dealing with it. Okay, so then the next verb phrase is because they can't read. So again, and it's funny because we were getting on the second sort of can't read situation, right? Okay, so because they can't read prescription labels. So again, we're going to come back through this. Prescription labels or instructions. And grow, right? Now, isolated here, you would think, okay, wow, isolate. So then you put in the ED and that's a verb. That's not actually a verb right there. That's an adjective. So, but it's to grow, right? So grow is the verb phrase there. And then I apologize if my narration here is a little spotty. This is my first attempt at that, and I don't do many Let's Plays, right? So grow, isolated. So grow is the verb phrase there. In a world increasingly dependent on, so dependent there is actually an adjective. And then you have the adverb describing the adjective. Dependent on computers. A lot of children are raised. So are raised is the verb phrase there. So we're going to highlight and underline that. So are raised is the verb phrase there. In households where parents are. So are is the verb phrase there. And again, are is by itself. So we're going to underline and put that in bold. And we're going to highlight that. So are low skilled or illiterate. And we all know, right? So know is the verb phrase there, and it's by itself as an action. So we're going to underline that, and we're going to put that in bold. Only a certain amount of learning happens, right? So happens is the verb phrase there. So we're going to underline that, bold that, and put that in yellow. In the classroom, we do nothing. So do is a verb phrase. Because like when your verb is like what is being done. So do would be something that's being done, right? We do nothing to address, right? To address is a verb. As a matter of fact, you know what? Let's make that whole thing, right? So it really is sort of two verbs next to each other. So to do, and then the nothing is actually a pronoun acting as a, okay, wait a second. Because I'm like, why is that not? So again, technical difficulties here. All right, here we go. All right, so to do nothing. So do nothing. So we're going to underline the whole thing, unbold, and bold the whole thing. So do nothing to address, right? So in this particular case, like nothing is almost like an adverb, where it's just like it changes the verb. So to do something is the verb, right? But then do nothing, right? Nothing being really a pronoun, but it's acting as an adverb there. To address. So to address being like the action, right? So do nothing to deal with, to, right? And then the households they are coming from. So are, is the final verb. And hold on a second, I'm not used to this mouse pad. Okay, that, and then that, and then that. Okay, now, so let's go back up to the top. All right, so it says, in the United States, with its considerable resources, there are 36 million adults, right? So again, R is talking about the existence of something, right? So R is talking about the existence of something. So what exists? 36 million adults, right? And where do those 36 million adults exist? In the United States, right? So there is really the subject that we're talking about, like, where, like, so in the United States, right, there are, right? And then R is telling you, what exists in the United States. Well, 36 million adults exist, right? So again, R being state of being verb, this is really giving me information about that, right? Now, notice that there's this parenthetical here, right? And again, a parenthetical being like this whole sort of, there's a comma there, and then there's a comma there, right? So with this is giving you more information about the United States. So let's actually put that in italics, right? So with its considerable resources, okay? Now, considerable, again, you can look that up online in terms of the definition of it. But considerable, keep in mind, is basically giving you more information about is basically like modifying resources. Like, so it's not consider, right? So you might look up the verb and it's like, oh, to consider. But this is considerable, and considerable is basically, again, giving you more information about the resources in and of itself. So the subject really, even though it's there, the subject is really is, and let's change our, yeah, that's good. The subject really is like the United States in this particular case, right? So with the United States, you have a situation where in the United States, there are all of these adults, right? How many adults? Well, and really that's let's find another color that you can see. Ah, perfect. Right. Now, so United States, there are adults. Now, 36 million, so adults is what? It's a noun, right? 36 million. So this is really giving you information about how many adults. So 36 really is really an adjective phrase, right? Because adjectives, again, gives us information about, those adults. Okay. Now, then it says who. Who is what? It's a pronoun, right? So who is always going to give us, an indication of, okay, I'm being substituted for a noun, right? And you always look for that noun for the most part, like 99.97% of the time. It's going to be some sort of noun that's come either, before, well, always pretty much before it. Every once in a while, depending on what the situation is. And sometimes if it's, and this is in terms of it being a statement, not necessarily a question. If it's a question, we'll get into that later. But if it's a statement, it's a situation where who right, is going to indicate that it's an adult, right? Now, sometimes it'll be a situation where, you're looking in other places and, we've encountered that over the course of the year. But for the most part, the rule of thumb is if you're looking for that noun, right, you go to like the nearest noun that precedes it. Now, so the who are the adults, right? So just in the sake of sanity here, we're going to make that who blue, right? But we know that who is the adults. So the adults can't read, right? So the adults are the ones who can't read. And then it says better than the average third grader. Okay. So that should be enough for the first sentence to help you, translate that into your own words. Now, then we have the next sentence. Those with low literacy skills, right? Now, again, with is what? A preposition. And just like the with here, with its considerable resources, right? With here is giving you a preposition and it's starting a what? A prepositional phrase. Now, is it clearly indicated with these two commas like it is up here? Not necessarily, right? So, but we pretty much know that with low literacy skills is giving us more information about those. Now, those is a what? Pronoun, right? So we would need to know who those are, right? So those with low literacy skills. Hold on, wait a second. So literacy, again, is the lack of, I would say for the most part, like reading skills, and usually used for that. But we've also talked about the fact that literacy skills, literacy skills can also mean low math skills as well. I group those in as well. So those people with low literacy skills, right, are far more likely. So it's those who is the subject of that sentence. So let's do that. Okay. So those are far more likely to live, right? Far more likely to live. Far more likely is giving you an an adverb, right? That's modifying the action of living, right? And then another word for poverty would be poor, right? So another word for poverty would be poor. Okay. And then we have a comma, right? So then we have another couple of verbs in the next part. So there's a bunch of details here, right? There's a bunch of details here. So in the first sentence, you have two verbs. So that means that when you're paraphrasing this, there should be two details that you're pulling out. In this next sentence, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 verbs. That basically means there should be 4 details that you pull out. 2 details corresponding to the first sentence and the first 2 verbs. 4 details corresponding to the next 4 verbs in the second sentence. Okay, so when you're putting this into your own words, and we're going through this, but again, I'm trying my best not to read for you. When you're going through this, you're making sure that you're putting this into your own words. You're trying to be as limited, right, as concise as possible. Concise meaning limited. But you also want to make sure that you include all the details. How do you make sure you include all the details? Well, if there are 4 verbs, you pretty much know there are 4 details, right? Okay. So it says those with low literacy skills are far more likely to live in poverty. Okay. And there's a comma there. Now we go to the next sentence. Face health problems. Okay. And then we have a conjunction. Okay. So again, you understand that conjunction does what? It links ideas, right? So as a reader, I know this is a good place to stop, right? Because this is going to show me the relationship between the ideas in this part of the sentence and the ideas in this part of the sentence. So it says face health problems. All right. So face, again, is a verb. Hold on. Wait a second. Now I'm looking for the subject. Where's the subject of that verb, right? Because there's a comma there. Guess what? If it's a situation where the verb is right there next to the comma, then guess what the subject is? Those, right? And those being who? Noun. Going back to that noun of adults, right? Now, notice that these verbs pretty much all being attached to the same subject, right? I mean, we're using different pronouns, but it's being attached to that subject, these adults. Now, what do we know about those adults so far? Now, this is where you're making a micro inference, right? And even this is a micro inference somewhat because of the fact that you're sitting there going, okay, with low literacy skills. Oh, okay. This is going back to the fact that low literacy means that you can't read better, okay? But face health problems, right? So who faces health problems? Those. Who are those? The adults, right? So micro inferences. So face health problems, right? Because, again, a conjunction, right? So that conjunction, and what can we do with you? I'm going to do you like that and like that. Okay. So because, right? What kind of relationship does because show, right? Well, there's somewhat of a clue right there, right? Cause, right? So it shows cause and effect. Okay, so keep that in mind. Because they can't read subscription labels. Okay, so they. Right? So can't read. Who can't read? I need a noun or a pronoun to be the subject. There's my pronoun right there. That was a little spittle. Okay. And I know this is usually much quicker lesson during the year, but just want to make sure for this first one, and the future ones will be a little bit faster than this, I think. Like I said, we're all sort of still getting used to, okay. Oh, and I'm not doing that. Okay. Like I said, this is the unedited version. All right, so they can't read, right? So they can't read. And now, again, a pronoun. Who are they? Well, again, going back all the way back to that, is they third graders? No, right? They, going back to those adults, right? They, going back to those adults. Is they dependents? No. You're not looking back. You're not looking down here. You're not going to, oh, are they parents? No. Are they children? No. Right? They, again, according to the rules, you're looking for the noun, right? And the technical word is antecedent. Don't have to worry about that necessarily. But you're looking for that noun that comes before it. They being the adults. They can't read prescription labels, right? Or instructions. Prescriptions are like medicine. So another word for prescriptions would be medicine. Okay. So again, for all these words that you don't necessarily know, again, especially since you guys are online, go into Google and just sort of type in the word and type definition after it, and it'll give you that. But keep in mind that just because looking up the definition, keep in mind the part of speech that you're looking at, right? Because you might see the word prescribe, right? Which is a verb, right? But this is prescription, right? So prescription here is an adjective. And what's next to it? Labels, right? A label is, that piece of paper that basically is on a box, or in this particular case, some pills or things like that, like a little pill bottle, right? So prescription is describing the type of label, right? So it's not a mailing label or anything like that. In this particular case, it's a prescription label or instructions. Okay. Then, okay, there it is. Again, grow, isolated. Now, in this particular case, it's not those, right? Well, in a sense, it is those, right? Because we're still dealing with the same noun, right? And grow, isolated. So notice with this comma, you have face, right? And you have grow. So basically, again, you have the verb, which is by itself. Okay, you have the verb by itself. So you have face by itself and you have grow by itself. So meaning that the pronoun, right, they, is going back to this noun, adults. So this pronoun they is going back to the noun, adults. So they grow isolated, right? And who is they? They are the adults. Okay. And again, isolated here, even though, you can isolate someone, right? Which the definition of isolated and isolate are pretty much synonymous with each other. They're kind of the same, right? When you isolate someone, that's an action. Here, this is a condition, like almost like a feeling, right? So if it's a feeling, right, which is sort of like a thing, but in this particular case, it's an adjective because it's describing these adults. So these adults are being isolated or feel isolated, or the adjective which is described as isolated. So in a world increasingly dependent on computers. So a lot of children are raised. So who is raised? The children. So the children here are the, hold on just a second.